Part 1. The discovery. The wind howled across the frozen landscape of Kepler 44 to be, carrying with it another wave of snow that seemed to never end. Dr. Sarah. Chen pulled her thick coat tighter around her body as she walked back to Research Outpost. Alpha. The small building looked like a metal box against the white wilderness, its lights glowing warmly in the endless winter. Sarah had been collecting ice samples from the nearby glacier. When she heard it, a sound that made her stop walking. It was soft and musical like a song, but filled with sadness. She looked around, trying to find where the sound was coming from. "Hello?" She called out, her voice almost lost in the wind. "Is someone there?" Sound came again, weaker this time. Sarah followed it, walking away from the safe path back to the outpost. Her boots crunched through the deep snow. She moved toward a small hill covered in ice crystals. That's when she saw her. A tiny figure was sitting in the snow, no bigger than a human child of maybe 6 years old. But this was no human child. The little being had skin that looked like glass, so clear that Sarah could almost see through it. The skin had a soft blue color, like the ice around them. It seemed to glow very faintly from inside. The creature's eyes were huge and purple, like two beautiful jewels. Tears were flowing from those eyes, but these were not normal tears. They glowed with a soft light, leaving bright tracks down the small face before disappearing into the snow. On top of the creature's head were two thin things that looked like tiny branches or antennas. They were moving slowly, glowing with a weak purple light that kept getting dimmer and dimmer. Sarah's heart broke when she saw the little being. She was clearly alone, cold and scared. The creature was wearing what looked like torn pieces of silver cloth, not nearly enough to keep. Warm in this freezing weather. "Oh, you poor little thing," Sarah whispered, dropping her sample bag and moving closer. The alien child looked up at Sarah with those big purple eyes. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then the little creature made that musical sound. Again, and somehow Sarah understood that it was crying for help. Sarah knelt down in the snow, not caring that the cold immediately soaked through her pants. She held out her hand slowly, the way she might approach a scared animal. "It's okay," she said gently. "I won't hurt you. I want to help." The alien child looked at Sarah's hands, then back at her face. Very slowly, she reached out with her own tiny hands. When their skin touched, Sarah felt a shock go through her body. Not painful, but like a small electric current. The child's hands were ice cold and felt strange, like touching smooth stone. But what surprised Sarah most was what happened next. Images flashed in her mind. She saw a bigger version of the creature, probably the mother, turning away and walking toward. A bright light. She saw the little one calling out, trying to follow, but being left behind. She felt the child's fear, loneliness, and confusion, as if they were her own feelings. "Your mother left you," Sarah said, and somehow she knew it was true. "She just left you here alone." The child made that musical sound again, sadder than before. Sarah felt tears in her own eyes, without thinking about rules or protocols, or what her team might say. Sarah scooped the alien child into her arms. The little being was so light, like she was made of air and starlight. She immediately snuggled against Sarah's warm coat, her tiny hands gripping the fabric tightly. "I've got you now," Sarah said. "You're safe." As Sarah carried the child back toward the outpost, she noticed footprints in the snow. 2 sets. One large, one small. They led from a flat area where something big had clearly landed, probably a spaceship. The large footprints went back to the landing spot, but the small ones stopped right where Sarah had found the child. Her mother had really just abandoned her there. Sarah felt angry. What kind of parent could leave their child alone in a freezing wilderness? What could this innocent little being have done to deserve such cruelty? The outpost's automatic doors slid open with a whoosh of warm air. Sarah stepped inside immediately. Feeling the temperature difference? The alien child in her arms made a small sound of relief. "Sarah, where have you been?" "We were starting to worry," called Dr. Marcus Webb from across the main room. He was sitting at one of the computer stations. working on data analysis. Marcus turned around and his mouth fell open when he saw what Sarah was carrying. "What the hell is that?" he said, jumping up from his chair. "She's a child," Sarah said firmly. "An alien child who was abandoned in the snow. She would have died if I hadn't found her." Dr. Lisa Park came running from the medical bay when she heard the commotion. "Sarah, please tell me you didn't just bring an unknown alien life form into our base." "Look at her," Sarah said, holding the child so both her teammates could see. "She's just a baby. She was freezing to death out there." The alien child looked at Marcus and Lisa with her big purple eyes. She made a soft musical sound, not the sad crying from before, but something that sounded almost like she was trying to say hello. Lisa's expression softened a little. "She is rather cute," she admitted. "But Sarah, we have protocols. We don't know anything about her species. She could be dangerous, or carrying diseases, or she could be a scared child who needs help," Sarah interrupted. "I'm taking her to the medical bay. She's hypothermic and probably dehydrated." Marcus stepped forward, looking worried. "Sarah, if Command finds out about this, we could all be in serious trouble. We're supposed to report any alien contact immediately." Sarah looked down at the little creature in her arms. The child was still gripping her coat tightly. Those antenna-like things on her head, now glowing a little brighter in the warmth of the outpost. "Then we don't tell Command yet," Sarah said. "Not until we know she's okay." She walked toward the medical bay, her teammates following behind her. As she laid the alien child on the examination table, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. This little being would not be abandoned again. Not while Sarah had anything to say about it. The child's purple eyes looked up at Sarah with what could only be described as trust. And in that moment, Sarah knew there was no going back. Part 2. First contact protocols. 3 days had passed since Sarah found the alien child in the snow. She had decided to call her Lyra because of the beautiful musical sounds she made. The little being was getting stronger every day, and Sarah was amazed by what she was learning about her. Lyra didn't eat food the way humans did. Instead, she seemed to absorb energy from the lights in the medical bay. When Sarah first noticed this, she was worried. But Lyra would sit under the bright medical lamps, and her translucent skin would glow brighter. The antenna-like things on her head would pulse with soft purple light, and she would make happy musical sounds. But strange things were starting to happen around the outpost. "Sarah, the computers are acting weird again," Marcus called from the main lab. "All the screens keep flickering, and the communication system just shut down for no reason." This had been happening more often. Equipment would malfunction when Lyra was nearby. At first, Sarah thought it was just coincidence. Yesterday, when Lyra had gotten excited about something, all the lights in the medical bay had suddenly become much brighter. And when she was sad, the power in her room would dim. "She's doing it somehow," Lisa said quietly to Sarah. "That child is affecting our electrical systems." Sarah looked through the glass window of the medical bay where Lyra was playing with some simple toys they had given her. The little alien was making a small metal ball float in the air above her hands, spinning it slowly while humming a gentle tune. "She's not hurting anything," Sarah said. "She's just ... different." "Different is an understatement," Marcus said, joining them. "I've been monitoring the energy readings around her, Sarah. She's generating electromagnetic fields that shouldn't be possible for something her size. And yesterday, I swear I saw her absorb electricity directly from a power outlet." Before Sarah could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the outpost. The main computer's voice echoed through the halls. "Incoming vessels detected. Unknown ships approaching. All personnel report to stations." Sarah's heart sank. She had been dreading this moment. Through the main window, they could see 3 large ships descending through the snow-filled sky. They were sleek and silver. Unlike any human technology, the ships landed smoothly in the flat area near the outpost, the same place where Lyra's mother had abandoned her. "Oh no," Sarah whispered. The ship's doors opened, and beings began walking out. They were tall and moved with perfect coordination, like they were all connected somehow. Even from a distance, Sarah could see they wore official-looking uniforms and carried weapons. "This is Research Outpost Alpha," Marcus said into the communication system. "Please identify yourselves," a voice answered, speaking perfect English, but with a strange accent. "This is Commander Zix of the Galactic Concordat. We are here on official business. You will open your facility immediately." Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. They've come for her. Lisa grabbed her arm. "Sarah, maybe this is for the best. Maybe they can take her back to her own people." "No," Sarah said firmly. "You didn't see what I saw. Her own people abandoned her, left her to die." The main door of the outpost opened, and 3 alien beings walked in. They were humanoid, but taller than humans, with gray skin and large black eyes. Their movements were precise and cold. The one in front, presumably Commander Zix, looked around the outpost with obvious displeasure. "Humans," he said, as if the word tasted bad. "We have detected a Resonori child in this facility. You will surrender her to us immediately, Resonori," Sarah asked. "The species you have illegally harbored," Commander Zix replied. "The child belongs to the Concordat. She is our property." Property. Sarah felt anger rising in her voice. "She's a child, not property." Commander Zix looked at Sarah with those cold black eyes. "You do not understand, human. The Resonari serve the Concordat. They are valuable assets when they function correctly. This particular specimen is defective." "Defective how?" Marcus asked. "She cannot perform the silence," another alien said. "All Resonari are born with the ability to create psychic voids that disable enemy technology and minds. This one was born. Without this gift, she is useless." Sarah felt sick. "So her mother just threw her away because she wasn't the right kind of weapon?" "The mother acted correctly," Commander Zix said. "Defective Resonari consume resources without providing value. The child should have been terminated at birth." "Terminated?" Sarah stepped forward. "You're talking about murdering a child." "Or talking about disposing of faulty equipment," the commander replied coldly. At that moment, Lyra appeared in the doorway of the medical bay. She had heard the voices and come to investigate. When she saw the Concordat aliens, she made a small, frightened sound and ran to Sarah, hiding behind her legs. Commander Zix pointed at Lyra. "There, the defective unit. Hand her over." "No," Sarah said, putting her arms protectively around Lyra. "This is not a request, human. Your species has probationary membership in galactic society. Interfering with Concordat business will result in immediate termination of your membership and possible sanctions against your entire planet." Sarah felt Lyra trembling against her legs. The little alien child was making soft musical sounds, but they were sad and scared now. "I don't care about membership," Sarah said. "I won't let you hurt her." Commander Zix looked surprised. "You would risk your species' future for one defective alien?" "Yes," Sarah said without hesitation. Marcus and Lisa exchanged worried looks. Sarah knew they were thinking about the consequences, about what this could mean for humanity's place in the galaxy. But when she looked down at Lyra's trusting purple eyes, none of that mattered. "The child has formed an attachment to you," Commander Zix observed. "This is ... unusual. Resonari do not typically bond with other species." "Yeah, baby, that's because no one ever tried to love them before," Sarah said. One of the other aliens whispered something to Commander Zix in a language Sarah didn't understand. The commander's expression changed slightly. "Interesting," he said. "Very well, human. You have 72 hours to reconsider. We will return, and you will surrender the defective unit. If you refuse, we will take her by force and report your interference to the Galactic Council." The 3 aliens turned and walked out of the outpost without another word. Through the window, Sarah watched their ships lift off and disappear into the snowy sky. "Sarah," Marcus said quietly, "what have you done?" Sarah looked down at Lyra, who was still clinging to her legs. The little alien child looked up at her with those big purple eyes, and Sarah felt that strange connection again. Images flashed in her mind. Not memories this time, but feelings. Gratitude, love, and something else. Hope. "I've done what any decent person would do," Sarah said. "I've chosen to protect a child. But even as she said it, Sarah knew that the next 72 hours would determine not just Lyra's fate, but possibly the future of humanity itself. Part 3. The human difference 2 days had passed since the Concordats' visit. Sarah knew they would return tomorrow, and she still had no plan for protecting Lyra, but something amazing was happening that none of them had expected. Lyra was changing it. Started small. The little alien child who had been weak and scared was now laughing and playing. Her translucent skin glowed brighter than ever before, and the antenna-like things on her head pulsed with beautiful colors, purple, blue, and sometimes even gold. But it was more than just her appearance. Lyra was learning to communicate. "Sarah," Lyra said one morning, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. It was the first time she had spoken a human word clearly. Sarah nearly dropped her coffee cup. "Did you just say my name?" Lyra smiled, showing tiny teeth that sparkled like crystals. "Sarah. Sarah good. Sarah safe." Marcus and Lisa came running when they heard the excitement. They watched in amazement as Lyra pointed to different objects and spoke their names in her musical voice. How was she learning so fast? Lisa asked Sarah. Had been wondering the same thing. But then something even more incredible happened. As Sarah was teaching Lyra new words, she suddenly felt the child's thoughts touching her mind. Not just images this time, but actual thoughts and feelings. "Thank you for keeping me safe," Lyra's voice whispered in Sarah's head. "I understand now. You are different from them." Sarah sat down hard in her chair. "Lyra, did you just speak in my mind?" Lyra nodded, her purple eyes bright with excitement. "Yes, the connection grows stronger every day. You have something they do not have." "What do I have?" Sarah asked out loud. "Love," Lyra replied in her mind. "Real love, not duty or rules or fear. Love that makes everything grow." Over the next few hours, Sarah discovered just how much Lyra had grown. The child could now control the outpost's electrical systems perfectly. She could make the lights dance in beautiful patterns, or focus all the energy into one area to create warmth. But most amazing of all was what happened when Sarah was feeling sad about the coming confrontation. Lyra had put her small hand on Sarah's arm, and suddenly Sarah felt a wave of comfort and strength flow through her. It was like being hugged from the inside, like having someone share their courage with you. "My God," Marcus said, watching the energy readings on his instruments. Sarah, her power levels just increased by 300% when she touched. It's the emotional bond," Lisa said, studying the data. "Somehow your connection with her is making her stronger." Sarah looked at Lyra, who was now floating small objects around the room while humming happily. The Concordat said she was defective because she couldn't perform the silence. But what if she wasn't meant to create silence? What if she was meant to create something else? That evening, Sarah sat with Lyra in the medical bay, teaching her how to read simple words. The child learned incredibly fast, absorbing information like a sponge absorbs water, Sarah. Lyra said in her mind, "Why did my mother leave me?" Sarah felt her heart break a little. How do you explain cruelty to a child? Your people have different rules than humans do. They only value children who can be weapons. But I am not a weapon, Lyra replied. I am something else. What are you? Sarah asked gently. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled that crystal-bright smile. I am a bridge, a connection. The silence destroys, but I create. I bring things together instead of tearing them apart, as if to demonstrate. Lyra reached out and touched one of the broken communication devices that Marcus had been trying to repair for weeks. The device suddenly came to life, all its circuits. Perfectly repaired, Lyra, Sarah gasped. How did you do that? I listened to what it wanted to be, Lyra explained. Everything wants to work, to be useful, to connect with other things. I just helped it remember how Sarah was beginning to understand. The Resonari had been bred to be destroyers, to create psychic voids that cut off all communication and thought. But Lyra was the opposite. She created connections, strengthened bonds, and helped things work better together. The next morning, Commander Zix and his ships returned exactly on time. "Human," the commander said as he entered the outpost with his guards, "your 72 hours are complete. Surrender the defective unit immediately." "Her name is Lyra," Sarah said, standing protectively in front of the child. "And she's not defective. She's evolved." Commander Zix laughed, a cold sound like breaking glass. "Evolved? The unit cannot even perform basic resonary functions." "Show him," Sarah said quietly to Lyra. Lyra stepped out from behind Sarah. Over the past 3 days, she had grown taller, and her skin now glowed with steady, warm light. The antenna on her head pulsed with rainbow colors. She looked directly at Commander Zix and spoke, not with her voice, but directly into his mind. The commander staggered backward, his black eyes wide with shock. "Impossible," he whispered. "You have been alone for so long?" Lyra's voice echoed in everyone's mind, even Sarah's. "All of you, cut off from each other, from joy, from love. You have forgotten what it feels like to truly connect." One of the Concordat guards dropped his weapon. Tears were streaming down his gray face. "I can feel your pain," Lyra continued. "The emptiness inside you. You were not always like this. Your species once knew love, once knew connection. But you traded it away for power." Commander Zix was shaking. "Now, stop this. Stop it immediately." But Lyra kept going. "I cannot perform the silence because I am the opposite of silence. I am harmony. I am the song your people forgot how to sing." The guard who had dropped his weapon fell to his knees. "Commander," he said in a voice full of wonder, "I can feel again. For the first time in centuries, I can feel." Sarah watched in amazement as the 3 Concordat aliens experienced emotions they had suppressed for generations. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. But Commander Zix fought against it. "No," he shouted, pulling out a weapon. "Yo, will not corrupt my soldiers with this weakness?" Before he could fire, Lyra did something that left everyone speechless. She created a dome of pure energy around herself and Sarah, but this wasn't a weapon. It was protection. Warm and gentle like a mother's embrace. Commander Zix fired his weapon, but the energy beam simply dissolved when it hit Lyra's shield. "I will not hurt you," Lyra said to him. "Even though you want to hurt me, this is what love does. It protects without destroying." The commander stared at the child in shock. In all his centuries of life, he had never seen power used for protection instead of attack. "What are you?" "He," whispered. Lyra smiled. "I am what your people could become again. I am what happens when love is allowed to grow instead of fear." For the first time since they had arrived, Commander Zix looked uncertain. He looked at his guard, who was still on his knees, crying tears of joy at being able to feel again. Sarah stepped forward. "She's not defective, Commander. She's what the Resonari were meant to be before you turned them into weapons. She's showing you what you've lost." Commander Zix stood frozen, his weapon still in his hand, staring at the glowing child who had just changed everything he thought he knew about power and strength. Part 4. The Revelation. Commander Zix stood frozen for several long minutes, staring at Lyra. His weapon trembled in his hand as he struggled with emotions that had been buried for centuries. Finally, he lowered the weapon. "This is not possible," he said quietly. "What you are showing us, ... it cannot be real." The guard, who was still on his knees, looked up at his commander with tears in his eyes. "Sir, I remember now. I remember my childhood before the conditioning. I had a name once, a real name, not just a number." "Silence," Commander Zix snapped, but his voice lacked its usual authority. Sarah stepped closer to Lyra, who was still, glowing with that protective energy. "What conditioning?" she asked. Commander Zix seemed to realize he had said too much. But the guard, still overwhelmed by his returned emotions, continued speaking. "All Resonari children undergo the silence training when they are very young," the guard said. "They suppress our natural abilities, our capacity to feel and connect, and replace it with the ability to create psychic voids." "You mean they're not born with the silence?" Sarah asked, shocked. "No," the guard said. his voice full of pain. We're born like her, like the child. We're meant to create harmony, to connect minds and hearts. A cart. They changed us. Commander Zix raised his weapon again, pointing it at his own guard. You will be silent, or I will execute you for treason. But Lyra stepped forward. Her small hand extended toward the commander. Let me show you the truth, she said in his mind. Before Commander Zix could react, Lyra's consciousness touched his. And suddenly, Sarah could see it too, through their connection. Images flooded all their minds, ancient Resonari, before the Concordat's rule. They were beautiful beings of light and music, living in harmony with nature and each other. They could communicate across vast distances, share emotions and thoughts, and heal both minds and bodies with their touch. But then came the Concordat, a coalition of older, more aggressive species who saw the Resonaries' abilities and wanted to use them for war. Sarah watched in horror as the images showed Resonari children being taken from their families, subjected to painful procedures that cut off their natural abilities and replaced them with the silence. Generations of genetic manipulation and mental conditioning had turned a race of healers into living weapons. No, Commander Zix whispered, his weapon falling from nerveless fingers. This is not ... We were told they were always warriors. It was their nature. You lied to yourselves for so long that you believed your own lies, Lyra said gently. But I am what they were meant to be, what they all could be again. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she understood the full scope of the tragedy. An entire species had been enslaved and twisted into something they were never meant to be. How many? Sarah asked quietly. How many Resonari are there? Millions, the guard answered. Across hundreds of worlds, all serving the Concordat as weapons and tools. Lyra's glow suddenly became brighter, and Sarah felt something incredible happening. Through their bond, she could sense Lyra reaching out, not just to the aliens in the room, but across space itself. My people, Lyra called out with her mind, her voice somehow traveling across the galaxy. Remember who you are. Remember what you were meant to be. Commander Zix stumbled backward. What is she doing? Sarah could feel it through her connection with Lyra. The child was using her evolved abilities to reach every Resonari in the galaxy, sending them the same images she had shared with the commander, showing them their true history, their real nature. She's waking them up, Sarah whispered in amazement, far across space. On Concordat ships and military bases, Resonari warriors suddenly stopped what they were doing. For the first time in generations, they remembered joy, love, curiosity, and creativity. They remembered what it felt like to connect with others instead of destroying them, Commander. Zix's communication device began beeping frantically. Report after report came in from across the Concordat territory. Sir, the Resonari units on Sector 7 have stopped responding to orders. Commander, our Psychic Weapons Division is refusing to participate in combat operations. Emergency on the flagship. All Resonari personnel are experiencing emotional episodes. Commander Zix looked at the device in horror. What have you done? Demanded, turning to Lyra. I have given them back what you stole, Lyra replied simply. I have reminded them that they are not weapons, they're people. Sarah realized what this meant. If millions of Resonari across the galaxy suddenly remembered their true nature, if they refused to be weapons anymore, the entire balance of power in the galaxy would shift. You don't understand, Commander Zix said desperately. Maintains order across thousands of worlds. Without the Resonari, there will be chaos. War. There's already war, Sarah interrupted. You've been using enslaved people as weapons. You've been committing genocide against an entire species for generations. Marcus and Lisa, who had been watching everything in stunned silence, finally found their voices. Sarah, Marcus said quietly. What you're describing, this is huge. This changes everything we know about galactic civilization. We have to tell people, Lisa added. Humanity needs to know what the Concordat really is. Commander Zix laughed bitterly. You think your species matters in this? You think anyone will listen to humans? You're nothing? A backwater species barely worthy of notice? But Sarah was already moving to the communication station. Her fingers flew over the controls as she began broadcasting on all human frequencies, military, civilian research, everything. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen at Research Outpost Alpha," she said into the microphone. "I am transmitting on all channels with information of critical importance to humanity and all free species in the galaxy." She began uploading everything. The images Lyra had shared, the recordings of the Concordat's admissions, the proof of what they had done to the Resonari. "The Galactic Concordat is not what they claim to be," Sarah continued. "They are slavers who have committed genocide against the Resonari people. They've enslaved an entire species and twisted them into weapons." Commander Zix lunged toward the communication station, but Lyra's protective energy stopped him cold. "No more lies," Lyra said firmly. "No more secrets. The truth will be known," as Sarah's broadcast spread across human space and beyond. She felt Lyra's presence in her mind, growing stronger. No. The child was still reaching out to Resonari across the galaxy, and with each mind she touched, her power grew. They're connecting to her, Sarah realized. All of them. She's creating a network, linking every Resonari who remembers their true nature. Commander Zix stood in the middle of the room, his entire worldview crumbling around him. His communication device was now screaming with emergency reports from every corner of Concordat space. "You've doomed us all," he whispered. Lyra looked at him with those wise purple eyes. "No," she said gently. "I have set us all free." Outside the outpost, Sarah could see more ships approaching through the snow. But these weren't Concordat vessels. These were ships from a dozen different species, all responding to her broadcast, all coming to see the truth for themselves. The galaxy was about to change forever, and it had all started with one human showing kindness to an abandoned child. In the snow? Part 5. The new harmony, the sky above Research Outpost Alpha, was filled with ships. Vessels from dozens of different species had arrived, drawn by Sarah's broadcast and the incredible events unfolding across the galaxy. Through the windows, Sarah could see representatives from the Altarian Republic, the Free Worlds Alliance, and even some species she didn't recognize. But the most impressive sight was the massive Concordat war fleet that had just emerged from hyperspace. Hundreds of ships, bristling with weapons, commanded by the Concordat High Council themselves. "They've come to end this," Commander Zix said, looking at the fleet with a mixture of fear and relief. "The High Council will not allow the Resonari rebellion to continue." Sarah looked at Lyra, who was now glowing so brightly that she seemed to be made of pure starlight. The child had grown even more in the past few hours, not just physically, but in presence and power. She was connected to millions of Resonar across the galaxy, and through her, they were all connecting to each other. "Do not fear," Lyra said, her voice now reaching not just their minds, but somehow broadcasting to every ship in the system. "Today, no one will die. Today we choose a different path." A communication came through from the lead Concordat battleship. The image that appeared on screen was of an ancient being with pale, wrinkled skin and eyes like black holes. "I am Supreme Chancellor Vex of the Concordat High Council," the creature said in a voice like grinding stone. "This rebellion ends now. All ships will stand down, and the corrupted Resonari will be terminated." Sarah stepped forward to the communication screen. "The only thing being terminated today is your slavery of an entire species." Supreme Chancellor Vex looked at Sarah with disgust. "Human, you have no understanding of what you have unleashed."
Ow.
"The Resonari were dangerous before we controlled them. They could destroy civilizations with their uncontrolled abilities." "That's another lie," Sarah replied firmly. "We've seen the truth. The Resonari were healers and connectors, not destroyers." "Prove it," Chancellor Vex challenged. "Let us see what your freed Resonari can do when faced with real power."
Ow.
Chancellor's image disappeared, and the massive Concordat fleet began moving into attack formation. Sarah felt her heart racing as she realized they were about to witness a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. But Lyra placed her small hand in Sarah's. Immediately Sarah felt calm. "Watch," Lyra said simply. "I see what love can do." Across the galaxy, on every Concordat ship, The Resonari, who had awakened to their true nature, began to act. But they didn't attack or destroy. Instead, they began to sing. It started as a whisper, barely audible. But as more and more Resonari joined in, the song grew stronger. It was the most beautiful sound Sarah had ever heard. Millions of voices joining in perfect harmony. Singing across the vast distances of space, the song reached every ship in the system, and something incredible happened. The weapons on the Concordat battleships simply stopped working. It's not destroyed or damaged, but gently disabled, as if they had simply decided to stop being weapons. Impossible. Chancellor Vex's voice came through the communications. Our systems are perfectly shielded. Your shields protect against attacks, Lyra replied, her voice somehow reaching every ship simultaneously. But they cannot protect against love. Love flows through everything, connects everything, heals everything. Sarah watched in amazement as Resonari throughout the Concordat fleet stepped away from their posts as weapons operators and instead began helping with medical care, engineering, and communications. They weren't fighting their former masters. They were simply refusing to be weapons anymore. On some ships, Sarah could see through the viewports as Concordat officers tried to force the Resonari back to their weapons stations. But when they touched the awakened Resonari, something beautiful happened. The officers themselves began to remember what it felt like to feel compassion, to connect with others, to choose cooperation over domination. They're healing them, Sarah whispered. The Resonari are healing the trauma and conditioning of their former masters. One by one, Concordat ships began standing down. Not because they were defeated, but because their crews were remembering what it felt like to be truly alive, to feel joy and wonder instead of just duty and fear. But Supreme Chancellor Vex was not giving up. His flagship, the largest ship in the fleet, broke away from the others and began charging directly toward the outpost. If I cannot control the Resonari, his voice boomed through space, then I will destroy the source of this infection. The battleship's main weapon began charging, a planet killer. Beam that could destroy the entire outpost and everyone in it. Sarah felt fear grip her heart. But Lyra squeezed her hand tighter. He has forgotten the most important truth, Lyra said. No one fights alone anymore. Suddenly, ships from every species in the system moved to protect the outpost. Human vessels, Altarian cruisers, ships from the Free Worlds Alliance, even some of the Concordat ships that had been converted by their awakened Resonari crews. They formed a protective wall between Chancellor Vex's flagship and the research station. But that wasn't all. Through the vast network Lyra had created, millions of Resonari across the galaxy joined their power together. Not to attack, but to protect. A shield of pure energy, powered by love and connection, surrounded not just the outpost, but every ship in the system. Chancellor Vex fired his planet killer weapon, but the beam simply dissolved when it hit the shield of harmonized energy. You have spent so long believing that power comes from fear and domination, Lyra said, her voice now carrying the combined wisdom of millions of awakened Resonari. But true power comes from connection, from choosing to build instead of destroy. For a long moment, the ancient chancellor was silent. Then, to everyone's amazement, his weapons powered down. I remember, his old voice whispered across the communication channels. Before the Concordat, before the conquests, I remember what it felt like to create instead of destroy.
Ow.
One by one, the other High Council members began to speak. Ancient beings who had ruled through fear for millennia were remembering what it felt like to feel joy, wonder, and hope. The rebellion was over, but not because anyone had been defeated. It was over because everyone had chosen to become something better. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the new Galactic Assembly building, watching as representatives from hundreds of species worked together to create a new form of government. The Concordat was being dissolved, replaced by a true alliance based on cooperation instead of domination. Lyra, now grown into a young adult, served as the first ambassador of harmony, helping species learn to communicate and connect with each other in ways they never had before. The Resonari had returned to their original role as healers and connectors, helping to heal the trauma of centuries of war and oppression. They established schools throughout the galaxy where children of all species could learn about empathy, connection, and the power of choosing love over fear and humanity. The young species that had shown compassion to one abandoned child was recognized as having a unique gift that the galaxy desperately needed: the ability to love unconditionally and see potential where others saw only problems. Sarah often looked back on that snowy day when she first found Lyra and marveled at how one simple act of kindness had changed everything. She had saved one child, but in doing so, she had helped save the entire galaxy. "Thank you," Lyra's voice whispered in her mind across the years, carrying with it the gratitude of billions of free beings. "Thank you for showing us all what it means to truly love." And in that moment, Sarah knew that the most powerful force in the universe had never been weapons or technology or fear. It had always been the simple, revolutionary act of choosing to care for someone who needed help. The galaxy was finally learning to sing in harmony, and it had all started with one human who refused to walk away from a crying child in the snow.